Hi folks, Harry Frank from Red Giant here, and in this tutorial I'd like to show you Chromatic Aberration from Red Giant Universe. Chromatic Aberration is a plugin that simulates the anomaly of the same name, where light passes through a lens and starts to separate towards the edges of the lens. This happens when a lens has a fairly extreme amount of curvature and the lens doesn't actually properly focus the light towards the edges of the lens, resulting in a color separation that happens to the light towards the edge of the lens as light passes through and doesn't properly focus in the same place that the light does in the center of the lens. So let me show you how this all comes together. So to apply chromatic aberration, I'll go to my Universe Distort section of my effects and apply Universe Chromatic Aberration. Immediately what you'll notice is we have this blurring and distortion of the image. There's also a little bit of lens texture being overlaid. So let's dive into the parameters. So right up here at the top, this is the heart of what's going on. We've got distortion and scale of each red, green, and blue channel. Now, what happens here is for any given channel, let's say the blue channel, we can distort this using a lens distortion. And we can do this individually with each channel. Now, if you want to achieve color separation without having to distort the image, there's also a scale available. And this simply scales the image from the center. Now, the default settings use kind of a mix and match here, but you don't have to distort the image and create that sort of lens distortion look. Now we can keep it fairly distorted but flatten the curvature of the lens by turning this flatten parameter up. So taking a look at what's going on here at the edges, we've got separation of each channel. To blend these together, there's both a Gaussian compound blur happening where there's less blur at the center and more blur around the edges. There's also a radial blur happening that smears the color channels together. Both of those blurs are kind of linked together through the radius and fall off. So if I turn up the edge blur, we start to see we've got quite a bit of blur happening. If I bring this radius down, we'll see that the blur will start to approach the center more and more. If I bring it up, it'll come out more towards the edges. And there's also a fall off control that controls the fall off from the center to the edge of the image. Now, if you don't want your blur to be perfectly circular, there is an aspect control here as well. By default, this aspect is linked to the lens texture aspect ratio. So let me show you that section. Let me turn this lens blur down just a little bit. In fact, let's jump back to this clip here. So in lens texture, we can choose a predefined lens texture that is built into the plugin and turn up that texture amount. You'll notice that the texture is actually embedded with the effect a bit. So the lens texture is affected by the distortion that's happening with the image, but less by the blurs. We also have the radius and fall off controls, just like we do with the blur function. But we can also turn off the masking if you'd like it to cover the entire image. Now this will remain true even if I select the layer option and go into my texture layer and define an external texture layer. So if I bring in a texture, it looks like so. I can go to the lens texture section and select that texture and overlay that with my footage. And notice that that will interact with the distortion of the effect. So that is Chromatic Aberration from Red Giant Universe. I hope you find it useful. My name's Harry Frank. Thank you so much for watching.